So before we get into this video, leave a little comment down below of what your favorite iPad of all time has been. Is it the first ever iPad that released with Steve Jobs? Or for me, it was a 2018 iPad Pro that really started my whole YouTube journey because of how beautiful that piece of hardware was. And the reason I'm talking about this is because we are just days away from Apple's Let Loose event, which is on May 7th. And then unfortunately on the Pacific Coast, it starts at 7 a.m. But on the East Coast, it starts at 10 a.m., which is exactly the same time that the 2018 iPad Pro was released. So there's a lot of similarities happening in that point. But I wanted to talk about this video and talk mostly about the iPad Pro and what to expect from it because we should see some major changes at the end of the day. So without further ado, let's talk about everything that we know about the iPad Pro and its corresponding accessories, which should be awesome. Let's get into it. Now, before we jump into what we expect, I do want to make sure that everybody's expectations are tailored correctly because yes, this is going to be Apple's biggest update to the iPad Pro since probably the 2018 iPad Pro, which released 6 years ago now at this point. But at the end of the day, once you get over the new design that's going to happen, the new update to the chipset, maybe some new accessories, you're still going to be using iPadOS. It's going to be very familiar and the sentiment is going to be very similar to maybe upgrading from an iPhone 13 to an iPhone 15. So definitely tailor your expectations a little bit and don't expect the absolute world, but definitely stay excited because I definitely am to see exactly what Apple's going to do. But let's start off with the design of what we expect from the new 2024 iPad Pro. Firstly, we will be keeping the two variants at the 11-inch iPad Pro size, and I believe it's going to be a 13.1-inch iPad Pro in terms of sizing for the larger iPad, but we're still going to have our kind of smaller size and then our larger size. The main thing you're going to notice about the iPad Pro when you first hold it is going to be that it's going to be a decent amount thinner, about 1 to 1.5 millimeters thinner, and that's due to the new OLED technology on the actual display because OLED technology is much thinner than mini LED, allowing Apple to really shrink the size of the iPad Pro, and we already have some leaks in terms of what the dimensions of this iPad Pro is going to be. Now, for better or for worse, it will be thinner. I think in the beginning it's going to be a nice kind of added bonus that it's going to be lighter and thinner. It's going to look even more sleek, but it could be prone to maybe more bending. I don't know if you guys remember Bendgate with the iPhone 6, but I can kind of see this being a little bit more on the frail side, but Apple will need to kind of hone in on their material choices when it comes to making sure that this thing is extremely rigid, because I remember with the 2018 iPad Pro, people would put the plain iPad Pro in their bag and then they would pull it out and there'd be kind of like this curvature on the iPad Pro that people were noticing, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen with a new thinner iPad Pro. And then in terms of when you actually see it, the bezels will be a little bit smaller, so we're still going to have the same form factor and footprint relative to the older iPad Pros, but the actual bezels will be thinner, which will allow for a larger screen size, and that's why I believe we're getting a 13 or a 13.1-inch display on the iPad Pro, the larger one, versus the 12.9-inch display. So that little bit of increase in size will actually make a little bit of a difference if you are coming from a 2018 iPad Pro. So visually, that's all we're going to get with the iPad Pro. Maybe Apple follows the design language of the iPhone 15s and kind of rounds off the corners and the size a little bit more while still keeping it flat. But for the most part, it's going to look relatively the same, just with a little bit better screen body ratio, and it'll be thinner and lighter. And then for the display itself, this is where we're going to get some new technology. So we're switching from mini LED on the larger 12.9-inch model to OLED, and then from the classic LCD display that we've had since 2018 on the 11-inch iPad Pro, we'll also be getting that OLED display. So this will be the first time since I believe 2021 that we were going to have the same exact screen tech on both the 11-inch as well as a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. And OLED, like I mentioned, will allow the iPad Pro to be a little bit thinner. I'm surprised that Apple went a little bit thinner on the iPad Pro as opposed to just keeping it the same thickness but adding more battery. But I think the reason they're doing that is because the OLED display will be more efficient from a battery standpoint because of the ability to kind of go all the way dark to zero when it comes to kind of having those crisp blacks. Because with OLED, each individual pixel is being lit up when needed. So if there is a black screen or something's happening, that pixel is technically shut off, which will allow for a better battery consumption overall. But it'll still be a beautiful display. We still will be getting ProMotion on both of them. It'll be 120 Hertz, and it's still going to be industry leading when it comes to the iPad Pro and the screen tech. Because I've always been a proponent of, especially on the mini LED side, that the mini LED tech and the screen itself and how beautiful it is enough to warrant the actual price tag of the iPad Pro. It just so happens that it is also a tablet underneath the hood of all that. Now, there were some rumors that Apple might be including a matte display option similar to the display option that we get with the Pro Display XDR. That one's kind of been up in the air. That could be hit or miss. It's going to be a 50-50 shot on that. But I could see Apple maybe having a $200 or $300 upgrade to get you that matte finish, so you do get that kind of texture display overall. And then when it comes to the internal hardware of the iPad Pro, we are getting some very confident rumors now that the M4 chip is going to make its debut on this iPad Pro on both the 11th and the 12.9-inch or the 13-inch for that matter. But the M4 chip is going to be very focused on having a good neural engine or a powerful neural engine to help with a lot more of these AI tasks that should be coming out with iPadOS 18 and moving forward in the future. There were some kind of rumors that Apple might hint, or Tim Cook might hint at some of the AI features that are coming out later this year at WWDC, but I think Apple's just getting everybody prepared, and maybe they're collecting a little bit more customer data by putting the M4 chip inside the iPad Pro so they can start to kind of shape exactly what their new AI engine is going to be like and how they want to actually propose that. My opinion is that Apple's going to implement AI in a way that we don't even know we're actually using it, as opposed to it just being an application that you ask it kind of factual questions that you don't know the answers to. But we'll get into all that as it comes down the line later this year. But again, the M4 chip should provide some more power from a performance standpoint, from a GPU standpoint, and it also should allow us to get more RAM options when it comes to the actual RAM capabilities of the M4 chip inside of the iPad Pro. It'll probably still start at the 8 gigs of RAM, but I do see us getting up to 24 to maybe even 32 gigs of RAM options on the iPad Pro, but it might require us to really kind of open up in terms of the actual hard drive space that you're going to be getting, because as of right now, the only way to get a 16 gig RAM option on the iPad Pro is to get 1 terabyte of storage. I would love it if Apple let us get maybe a 512 gig and then let us choose the actual RAM storage or the RAM capabilities of the iPad Pro separately, as opposed to forcing us to upgrade to 1 terabyte of actual internal SSD storage. And then one more thing that I believe is happening is that Apple will be finally moving the camera orientation from portrait mode over to landscape mode, because a lot of people have complained for years about being able to use their iPad for actual Zoom calls and work meetings. And although Apple implemented that center stage feature for the camera so it could kind of follow you around and maybe center you a little bit better, it still doesn't work great. You're always kind of like looking off to the side to make sure that you're looking correctly and things like that. So bringing it over to the correct orientation, in my opinion, is going to be a great move. And then Apple's going to have to figure out the actual physics of how they're going to allow us to still charge the Apple Pencil. But I'm sure Apple's going to be able to figure that out relatively easily and be able to fit it in that small little bezel that they are including. And then I wouldn't be surprised if there are some extra pin connectors on the rear of this iPad Pro to allow for better data pass-through for some of the accessories that we're about to touch on. So hopefully Apple does allow for that to happen, because the next thing that's going to be coming out is a Magic Keyboard alongside of it. Now, this Magic Keyboard is going to be kind of mimicking what an actual MacBook looks like. According to Mark Gurman and some of the reports that we've seen, the new Magic Keyboard will have some sort of aluminum alloy in it. It's going to be a little bit more MacBook-like. It's going to have a bigger trackpad. The actual hinge design might be completely different. So I'm almost picturing kind of like the Bridge keyboard from days past, where unfortunately the Bridge keyboard aesthetically looked amazing. It just lacked the software in the implementation, in the integrations that Apple didn't allow it to have. So I could see Apple maybe adopting something like this while still keeping kind of that unique double hinge design in some way. But let's see what Apple ends up doing with this Magic Keyboard, but definitely expect the ability to maybe have some data pass-through and not just charging pass-through, because we will be getting more pin connectors. It'll attach via magnets. It'll be nice and sleek. And also, don't be surprised if Apple finally adds a nice little function row for the iPad Pro, because that's something that a lot of people missed out on with the Magic Keyboard. But I definitely expect some sort of data pass-through, maybe additional USB-C or Thunderbolt ports to be added on there to give you just a little bit more accessibility for maybe dongles and USB-C hubs and things of that nature, just to make it a little bit more computer-like at the end of the day for most people. And then finally, we can't talk about the iPad Pro without talking about a new Apple Pencil. And from the actual invite itself, the first thing that you see front and center isn't even an iPad, it's a hand holding an Apple Pencil, which goes to show you that the Apple Pencil will be finally updated. We've had the Apple Pencil 2 be the same exact piece of hardware since the 2018 iPad Pro released. Now again, the Apple Pencil has always been one of those kind of products for me that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, I don't know what I would have added to it to make it better, but a lot of people seem to have want a new Apple Pencil for their use cases. Again, I'm not really using the Apple Pencil for anything more than note-taking and some very, very harsh and kind of minimal sketching whenever that happens. And then, my daughter likes to use the Apple Pencil from time to time on the Notes app. But outside of that, the Apple Pencil has been totally fine for me, but the Apple Pencil 3 is rumored to have a few new additions on there. So from a form factor standpoint, I'm picturing it being the same exact form factor, but there's 3 main things that are happening to the new Apple Pencil 3. The first being maybe interchangeable magnetic tips. The second thing that's coming to the Apple Pencil 3 is going to be Find My support, which is, thank goodness, I've lost, I think, 3 different Apple Pencil 2s over the span of 6 years, which is absolutely nuts, because it does fall out, you misplace it very easily. I will say, ever since I put the paper-like grip on the Apple Pencil 2, I haven't had an issue with actually losing it because it's easier to find, but I will say that white Apple Pencil gets lost a lot. If you do just have the Apple Pencil magnetically attached and throw that in your bag, it's going to end up at the bottom of your bag and you're going to end up losing it and things like that. So having Find My support with maybe a little speaker chime is going to be amazing to have. And then lastly, Apple's finally adding a new way to actually interact with the Apple Pencil, which is going to be with a squeeze gesture. So Apple will be adding some sort of new shortcut ability or maybe some customization to the Apple Pencil 3 that allows you to squeeze not only quickly, but also squeeze and hold it to give you a couple different actions, maybe switching between brushes or maybe a shortcut to activate, or maybe you open up an application that corresponds with that squeeze gesture. So let's see exactly what Apple does, but that is what we expect from the Apple Pencil 3 in a nutshell. So that's everything we expect from the iPad Pro announcement during the Let Loose event. Like I mentioned, iPad Air should also be announced. We should be getting a larger iPad Air, but that's going to be the same exact thing as a 10.9-inch iPad Air, just a little bit larger with maybe an M2 chip. But I'm curious to know what you guys think about this new update, because the iPad Pro, from a hardware perspective, has always been way ahead of the game. Even the 2018 iPad Pro, tablets to this day are still trying to catch up to it. My wife still uses the 2018 iPad Pro on a daily basis. It's not slowing down. So Apple's always been ahead of the game from a hardware and quality standpoint. It's just the OS that for some people, depending on your workflow, is what either slows it down or makes you not want to use it as a complete replacement to your computer or your laptop. You know, it kind of is a one-trick pony, but at the same time, it can do multiple things. So the iPad Pro and where it kind of fits in your workflow is supposedly very niche right now because of what use cases you use it for. So I'm curious to know what would be one thing, and leave it in the comments down below, that would want to make you use your iPad Pro as your main computer. Is it an operating system thing? Do you want Mac OS on it? Do you want a combination of iPad OS and Mac OS? Are there certain applications that just aren't there yet? Or maybe the applications are there, but they're watered down? Let me know in the comment down below, because that is the bigger question here. It's not a question of hardware. Apple's going to give us a beautiful design piece of hardware come May 7th. It's just a software standpoint. What is Apple going to do to the iPad Pro with iPad OS to really make it something that people want to use long term, and it's not just kind of like a content consumption machine or just a small design tool? But let me know in the comment down below. Like I mentioned, I'm very excited at the end of the day. Just make sure your expectations are set correctly. Don't expect this to be some sort of insane kind of change. It's still going to be an iPad Pro at the end of the day. It's just something that will be better than what we currently have, and it's going to be 2024ified, and it's going to be able to future-proof you maybe 6 to 7 years down the line. So let me know what you think about the Let Loose event, the iPad Pro, the iPad Air. And if you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you made it to the end of this video, that means you guys have been supporters of ours for a long time. So definitely take a look and maybe join our new membership program, which allows us to give you new wallpapers, and we're going to do live streams together and things like that, just to kind of engage with the community a little bit more. But if you guys want to watch more videos like this one, click on one of these right here. And at the end of the day, I'm just excited for May 7th. So definitely 7 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Eastern time. Let's see what Apple gives us. Peace, everybody.